Good afternoon and welcome to Lunch Break Live with Tea Party Patriots Action. I'm Bill Pasco, Tea Party Patriots man in Washington, and I'll be delivering both the call to action and the Washington Report. Let's get to it. The House and Senate are both in recess for the Jewish holiday and will not return until next week. The Senate will return Monday, September 29th, and the House is scheduled to return on Wednesday, October 1. Last week in the House came back on Monday and took up and passed two bills under suspension of the rules. On Tuesday, the House took up and passed a rule governing floor consideration of several bills. Then the House took up and passed H.R. 2721, the Honoring Our Heroes Act. Then the House took up and passed H.R. 4922, the D.C. Crimes Act, and H.R. 5140 to lower the age at which a minor may be charged as an adult for certain criminal offenses in the District of Columbia to 14 years of age. On Wednesday, the House took up and passed another rule governing floor consideration of several bills. Then the House took up and passed H.R. 5125, the District of Columbia Judicial Nominations Reform Act, and H.R. 5143, the District of Columbia Policing Protection Act. Then the House took up and passed a motion to table H.Res. 713, a resolution to censure U.S. Representative Ilhan Omar. The motion to table passed by a vote of 214 to 213, with 4 Republicans crossing party lines to vote with all the Democrats to protect Congresswoman Omar from censure. On Thursday, the House took up and passed H.R. 3062, the Promoting Cross-Border Energy Infrastructure Act, H.R. 3015, the National Coal Council Reestablishment Act, and H.R. 1047, the Grid Power Act. Then the House took up H.R. 5371, the Continuing Appropriations and Extensions Act of 2026, about which we will speak more in a moment. The vote to pass it was 217 to 212, with 2 Republicans, Thomas Massie of Kentucky and Victoria Spartz of Indiana, voting against it, and 1 Democrat, Jared Golden of Maine, voting for it. Then the House took up and passed H.Res. 719, honoring the life and legacy of Charlie Kirk, by a vote of 310 to 58, with 95 Democrats crossing party lines to vote in favor of the resolution, 58 Democrats voting against it, 38 Democrats voting present, and 22 Democrats not voting at all. And then they were done. Last week in the Senate came back on Monday and voted to agree to the resolution S.Res. 377, an executive resolution authorizing the en bloc consideration in executive session of certain nominations on the executive calendar. Then the Senate voted to end debate on the nomination of Stephen Moran to serve as a member of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System. Then, by a vote of 48 to 47, the Senate voted to confirm him to that position. On Tuesday, the Senate rejected a motion to proceed to S.J. Res. 60, a Congressional Review Act resolution of disapproval against a Biden-era rule submitted by the EPA. Then, by a vote of 36 to 62, the Senate failed to agree to a motion to proceed to S.Con. Res. 22, Kentucky Senator Rand Paul's proposed budget for the federal government for FY 2026. On Wednesday, through a series of maneuvers and votes, the Senate invoked the nuclear option to set up en bloc consideration of 48 Trump nominees in one vote. On Thursday, that one vote took place, and by a vote of 51 to 47, all 48 Trump nominees were confirmed. On Friday, by a vote of 47 to 45, the Senate rejected the Democrats' proposed continuing resolution, about which we will speak more in a moment. Then, by a vote of 44 to 48, the Senate rejected H.R. 5371, the House-passed Republican continuing resolution, about which we will speak more in a moment. Then the Senate voted to end debate on the nomination of Michael Waltz to be representative of the United States to the United Nations. Then the Senate voted to confirm him to that position, and then they were done. Now, Government spending, deal or no deal? On Tuesday of last week, Speaker Mike Johnson released the GOP continuing resolution. It's a 7-week clean CR that essentially maintains funding at current levels until November 21. It's meant to do nothing more than give appropriators the time necessary to finalize their negotiations over a full-year spending package. At first, because the bill was so simple, it's only 91 pages long, a welcome relief from recent years when we were looking at 1,000-page spending bills, there was talk of maybe voting on it Thursday. That would have technically been a violation of the Speaker's commitment to always give his members at least 72 hours to read any bill before voting on it. But in short order, that talk was done away with. The vote was set for Friday. In a first in recent memory, there was no organized opposition to the spending bill on the right side of the GOP conference. The usual suspects raised objections, Thomas Massie of Kentucky and Victoria Sparks of Indiana, but none of the members of the House Freedom Caucus made ugly noises. When the vote arrived, it went about as expected. Massie and Sparks were the only two Republicans to vote against the bill, and Jared Golden of Maine, who regularly crosses party lines to vote with Republicans on spending bills like this, did what he usually does and voted with the GOP. And that was that. The bill passed the House with very little drama. Then the bill went to the Senate for consideration. Senate Democrats got a vote on their counterproposal, which Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries had introduced earlier in the week. It was a 4-week CR, which funded the government through October 31, but it was not clean at all. In fact, it was quite dirty. It restored the Medicaid cuts included in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act that had passed the House and the Senate just a few months ago in July. And it added hundreds of billions in cost by extending the ObamaCare enhanced premium tax credits that are about to expire at the end of the year. We haven't talked much about these Obamacare tax credits, so let's take a moment and get into it. Back in 2021, when Democrats had the trifecta, that is, Joe Biden in the White House and majorities in both the House and Senate, they decided to expand Obamacare. They really pushed states to add lower-income people who were uninsured to their Medicaid rolls, and they wanted to find a way to lure more uninsured people who made too much money to qualify for Medicaid onto the Obamacare marketplace plans. So they raised the threshold for premium tax credits so that people who got up to 400% of the federal poverty line could qualify for taxpayer assistance in the form of significant premium tax credits. Not surprisingly, it worked. It turns out that throwing money at people is a good way to incentivize them to do things you want them to do. In this case, the federal government threw tens of billions of dollars a year at the target population, and the target population responded. They went into the Obamacare marketplaces and they purchased plans. In 2021, as part of the American Rescue Plan, Joe Biden's first reconciliation bill, the Democrats passed without a single GOP vote a plan to plus up the premium tax credits that already existed for 2 years, 2021 and 2022. Then, the following year, with the wrongly named Inflation Reduction Act, Joe Biden's second reconciliation bill, they extended the tax credits for another 3 years, 2023, 2024, and 2025. So the Democrats deliberately built a cliff of sorts into the tax credit package. Politically, it was very clever because the funding only went for 2 years in the first case and 3 years in the second case. It didn't look like a whole lot of money. Certainly, when the whole packages were considered, and remember, these bills spent trillions of dollars. A few tens of billions here and a few tens of billions there didn't look like much. And by creating these tax credits that only lasted a few years each, they built in a fiscal cliff, where one of two things would happen. Either they would be in power in 2025, in which case they would vote to extend them again a few years and a few tens of billions of dollars at a time, or they would not be in power, in which case they would point at the Republicans and scream bloody murder about how the Republicans were taking away your health care. Brilliant, politically brilliant. So that's where we are now. The extended Obamacare premium tax credits are going to expire at the end of the year. That's current law. And that means that in very short order, when the Obamacare window opens, people are going to be shopping for plans for next year, and they're going to be stunned to see the real cost of the program, because there won't any longer be these tax credits that hid the true cost. In many cases, the premium tax credits were worth about 75% of the cost of the monthly premium, which means that when they go away, the cost to the consumer is going to increase by 300%. Think of that. If your premium was actually $2,000 a month for a family plan, and you got a 75% premium tax credit, your monthly out-of-pocket cost was just $500. That comes out to $6,000 a year. Now your monthly cost without the premium tax credit is going to go to $2,000, and your yearly cost is going to shoot up to $24,000. That's going to be a killer, and quite literally millions of people are likely to drop their coverage because it will be too expensive for them. So the Democrats are insisting that extending these premium tax credits is going to be the cost for their votes on this short-term CR. Senate Majority Leader John Thune is saying no way, no how. He's not about to set the precedent that there should be a significant spending package added to a short-term CR. So the Democrats added this extended premium tax credit to their CR, and they offered it up for a vote on Friday. And it went down, as you might imagine, because all the Republicans voted against it. And then the Majority Leader put on the floor the CR that had just passed the House, and all the Democrats voted against that. So it went down too. And that left us stuck Friday evening with no funding bill. The House leadership announced that it was canceling plans to come back on Monday, September 29. Instead, the House won't come back until Wednesday, October 1, meaning that it's quite possible that the House won't even come back until the government is already shut down. On Saturday, 2 days ago, Schumer and Jeffries sent a letter directly to President Trump demanding that they have a meeting to discuss ways to avoid a shutdown. Stay tuned. Now, let's talk about Russia and Ukraine. I think it's safe at this point to say that if the purpose of President Trump's mid-August summit meeting in Alaska with Russian dictator Vladimir Putin was to end the war in Ukraine, that summit was a failure. Instead, since then, Russia has stepped up its aerial assaults on Ukraine, raining drones and missiles down on Ukrainian cities like never before. But instead of countering Russia by increasing sanctions against Putin and his cronies, Trump pivoted to increase pressure on America's European allies. Insisting that this must be a team effort, he says he is willing to impose tough sanctions on Russia as soon as Europe stops funding the Russian war machine by buying Russian oil and natural gas. To be specific, Trump has conditioned American action on European action. But we will not go first. Only when he sees that Europe has stopped buying Russian oil and natural gas will he consent to step up the sanctions pressure against Russia. This, I must say, is a clever maneuver by Trump. It allows him to turn the game on Ukraine's supporters in Europe. He says he wants to help Ukraine, but it will do no good to increase sanctions against Russia as long as Russia is allowed to sell its oil and gas to European nations. So until they cut off Russia, it wouldn't do any good to impose further sanctions on the part of the U.S. Later this week, Thursday, one of the European countries that buys the most Russian oil, that is Turkey, will have its president, Erdogan, here in Washington for meetings with President Trump. I'll be interested to learn whether this is a topic of discussion between the two, and if so, what comes of that conversation. Now to the Jenny Beth Show. On Wednesday, episode 139 of the Jenny Beth Show dropped. It's a special episode honoring Charlie Kirk's legacy of faith, freedom, and courage. The episode features Jenny Beth's remembrance of Charlie, how they met and worked together over the years, and it includes Jenny Beth's full conversation with Charlie from an earlier episode of this podcast. As always, it's highly recommended. And that's our Washington Report for this week. Now to the call to action. The Election Assistance Commission is now taking public comments in support of the petition filed by America First Legal Foundation, asking the EAC to change the voter registration form to include proof of citizenship. If you go to www.regulations.gov, you'll find a search box right in the middle of the page. Type in America First Legal Foundation, and you'll get search results. And the very first search result says, Petition of America First Legal Foundation for Rulemaking. That's the one you want. Click on that link, and it'll take you to the comments page for the AFL petition, and you'll see a box there that says Comment. Move the cursor there, click it, and you'll be able to enter your comment up to 5,000 characters. The comments period is open for another 4 weeks until Monday, October 20. That's our broadcast for this week. We'll see you next week, same place, same time. Until then, be well and be active.